Hi, in this video we're going to demonstrate NLog, or logging for your application using C#. So we're going to take this application that we've built in the past and add some events to it that we can put in our server log. So stick around and we'll see how to do that. So if you'd like to use the exact same application that we're going to demonstrate here, you can go back and do a tutorial that we've done in a previous lesson. Or if you have another favorite application that you just want to add logging to, then you can continue on and adapt your changes as necessary. So as you can see in our application, we have a few views. We have for login, success, and for failure. We also have in our models section, we also have a user model, and so that'll give you an idea of what's going on here. In our database, we do have DBO users, and if we want to see what's inside of there, we can look at the data, and you can see I have 2 users in the tables. So if we want to add logging to an application, we need to use NuGet. So I'm going to right-click on the activities title and choose Manage NuGet Packages. So once you choose Managing Packages, you'll see things that are installed and things that are not installed. So I want to browse to the things that are not installed yet, and I'm going to search for NLog, which is the package here. So we can see NLog is a logging platform for .NET. So I'm going to choose this one. I'll choose version 4.7 and click OK. Also, I want to choose NLog config as another package. All right, so these are supposedly installed. Let's go check the Install tab to see if they're there. And sure enough, I have installed 3 things with NLog in the title. So the next part that we're going to do is configure what we just set up as our logging. So I'm going to the file called nlog.config. And you can see that there's some XML commands here. And the file that we're looking for, or the part that we're looking for, is down here, where it says write events to a file. So it gives us a template to follow. I'm going to simply uncomment this section and use the example that they've given here. So let's take the target area that they've recommended. I'm going to copy it and come up to the area that calls targets and paste it. So if you don't have this example in your setup here, you can copy it from mine. So let's take a look at what it does. So it says here that the type of file or the type of record that we're saving is a file. So the next item that I'm going to change is name. So name is the actual name of the target. So I'm going to call mine My App Logger Target. The next section over suggests a file name. So you can see that base directory is the item that they choose first. So that's the base directory of your application. And then a subfolder in your app called logs. And then they're going to use the name of the date. So if it's March 20th, it'll be all those 3/20/2020 or whatever the year is, be all combined into one file name. And then .log is a standard name for a file. Now then the layout is the actual line-by-line item that you're going to put in the log. And the important one here is at the end is the message. So whichever item that we're logging will be, this is the content here. And then of course the other stuff is the dates to tell us when it was logged. Now let's go down to the section called rules. It says here, add your logging rules here. Well, they've given us a suggestion, so I'm going to copy and paste the suggestion as well. So the logger name, let's change that from a star. So I'll just put in My App Logger Rules as the name. The min level, so we can change this to different levels. The one that we're going to pick is debug for right now. And so this is the most verbose, if you remember from the previous video, that will get all of the details of the application. Then when the last section is write to, we need to specify the name of a target. And of course we named the target just a few minutes ago as My App Logger Target. And so that'll be the configuration for our log. So let's take a second here and look at what a real log will look like when we're done. So I'm going to browse into another project, and this one was called Activity 13, and it's not this exact same one, but it does have a log in it. So if I go into the logs folder where we've specified, you can see that I have several log files that were created. So this one here was done on March 18th. And you can see that the format that we defined is here. We've got the date, we've got some kind of a logging level, so that doesn't say debug, but it says info. and then it has the message that I programmed in, and it tells us the location. So this is what your logs are going to look like by the time we're done. So the next part of our logging application is to now place some items in our code to trigger an item in the log. Let's go to our controller. So I'm going to switch to the controllers folder and go to the login controller. So if you're working on a different application, you'll probably have a similar controller, but we need to go here. So the first thing I need to do in this controller is to set up a reference to the logger tools that we just installed using NuGet. So I'm going to instantiate a copy of Logger, the Logger class. And I'm going to have to use the parameters that we just created in the XML file. My application logger rules is the parameter that I'm looking for. And so this will initiate a new logger. You can see that I also have to import these classes or use the using statement at the top of the page. So for the first example, I'm going to use a real simple method. We're just going to log an info level message. And so I'll put something like I'm entering the login controller using the login method. Let's also put in some alerts for the success and the failure for our login. So I'll slip in here a line in the success section. I'll say exiting the controller and login was a success. And we're using the info extension again, so that's the level of logging that we're doing. Also at the same level here, we'll do info as to say that the login failed, and we'll put in a message for failure as well. Now there may have been some other code that I had put into this tutorial in a previous step, so I'm not sure if I used try or catch before. Anyway, I'm going to put it in now. So I'm going to use a try and do the entire block of code that we worked on just a second ago, and also put in a catch. Now also at the catch area, I'm going to put in a log event. Now for the logger here, I'm not going to put it as an info level log event, it's a error log event. And so the error could occur for any reason in the exception. So I'll just put in the e.message for our exception. Also, I may have also included some other code in the previous tutorial about the model state. And so we're just going to make sure that the state is valid so that they haven't put in numbers where they should have put letters and vice versa. So I'll just slip in an extra line of code to make sure that the valid model state is true. So just a summary here, we have an info level logging event, an info level, and an error level at the logging event. So we should be able to see these in our logs when we run the application. So let's give it a shot. Let's go ahead and log in and see if we can get a login success and a login failure. All right, it looks like the app is up and running. So I'm going to go to the login controller and give this a shot. Now, what were my passwords again? Let's go back and check out the DBO users table. I have Max and Penny as my only two people in the system, so I can use either of those. Let's try Max, and his password is password1 with just a 1, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and try the create button, which is really the login button. So it says success. Let's back up and let's put in a junk password and choose the button, and it says failure. So that should work. Let's go check out the logs. So I'm going to my computer here, I'm browsing the folders, and I'm looking in the source area, the repos, and let's see, this thing is called activity 3 NLog. Keep going, activity 3, there is a folder called logs here somewhere. So I'm looking in my folder and I'm looking for the folder called logs. Obviously it didn't work. So I intentionally created an error so that you could see how to fix it. So where's the mysterious logs folder? It's supposed to be here. Let's go back and look in our NLog config and see if I can trace down the error. Likely you'll have to do the same things. So first of all, I check to make sure that I've got my name here, my app logger target, and that matches down here with the rules. They're spelled the exact same way. How about the logger rule itself? This says my app logger rule. And when I created my login controller, I probably spelled that differently. So here it is, my app logger rules. So I think I need to fix this. So I'm either going to copy this, and paste it over top of the original, or vice versa, either way. So let's save that and let's run the app again. All right, it looks like I'm up and running, so I'm going to choose the login option and let's try a few more attempts at this. Let's go with Max and his password 1. We've got a success, so that should be something in our log, and let's put in some junk here and try again, and we have a login failed. All right, back to the folders, And let's take a look at activity 3. So here we are, and sure enough, there's a folder called logs. It looks successful this time. And today's date is the 25th. Let's double click it. And here we go. We've got ourselves a couple of infos, and we got entering and exiting. This looks like we're making some success. So this log folder then is just a text file, but if we had a more professional logging system, a little bit bigger enterprise, you might call it, a level of more centralization, this would all be copied to another location. It would be put into a database. It would be searchable. It would go into a report. And then this is the what do you call it, the raw material of the log product. Hey, all right, now we're going to turn the page and we're going to do some refactoring. So if you look at the code that I have on the screen, I've made several changes. So you can notice here in the line that initiates our logger, we are now calling something called getInstance. Now, how did I create that? Well, we're going to answer that question in just a moment. But first of all, what are we looking at? So this is called a singleton. A singleton is a good type of design if you are creating an object that will be used throughout your program. And you'll have exactly one instance of that object. So the name singleton. So singletons show up in things like logging because we want to have one logger for the whole application. You'll also see singletons used in sometimes database connections. So like, at the beginning of the program, you make an initial connection to the database, and then throughout the program, you want to use that same connection. So you're not opening and closing connections all the time. And so this is the pattern that we're going to fix right now. So we're going to have to create an interface and another design pattern you might call the facade. So let's get started with that. Okay, so I just returned the code to the position that it was just a few minutes before. So we have our instance right now as my logger listed as this line here on line 15. So let's get started with making this singleton pattern. The first thing I want to do is to go find the folder in services over here, services, and let's open up the services area and let's create a new folder. And we're going to call this thing utility. So new folder and utility. So utility is the things where you put, things that are kind of generally used throughout the whole program. Now I'm also going to add a new item here. So let's choose a class, and I'm going to call this thing iLogger. So when you put the word I in front of something, that kind of indicates that you're creating an interface. So I'm going to erase the word class and change it to interface. Okay, so interface is, like probably from other programming, that an interface is a pattern. It's a contract. All we're going to do is list the methods of a class, and then the next iteration of this, the one that implements this, will actually have to write the code. So all we're going to do is write down 4 different class methods here. So the methods that we're going to create for this interface are going to be for the 4 different kinds of levels of logging. So we're going to have debug, and we're going to have warning and error and info. And so we're going to accept a message and an argument. So the argument we won't probably see much of, but we're going to at least use a possible argument that is passed into this method. And by the default, it's set to null. Okay, so we're going to implement a debug, and we're going to implement an info, and implement a warning and an error. So all 4 of these are going to be methods that will be in our new logger. And so we're just making the contract here to say, expect to see these 4 names. Now let's go ahead and create the class that goes with this. So let's go to the utility folder again, and we're going to add a class. So we'll switch there. And this one we're going to call myLogger. Now you could guess that we are going to implement what I just created a second ago. So let's go with iLogger as our implementation. So first of all, you're going to say, you're missing your implementation. So let's take care of that right away. So I'm going to choose Show Potential Fixes under the light bulb, and I'm going to implement the interface. So there you have it. We've got those 4 methods that we promised to create in the iLogger class. So I'm going to just ignore those for a little bit, but we'll shove them down the page because they're for later. So now I'm going to illustrate the pattern called a singleton. Singleton is the object that can only be instantiated one time. And so we'll create some special code that will allow only one of them to exist. So the first item that we're going to create as a property of myLogger is called the instance. So the instance is an instance of this name of this class, myLogger. And so we'll just make it private and static. So static's a key idea here. You can only make one of them. Okay, so I'm trying to make a instance of the generic class called logger. But as you can see, my Visual Studio is not allowing me to do that automatically. So let's go back and retype it. So since I don't have the instance or don't have a class mention of logger, it says, hey, what are you going to do? Well, fortunately, we can use NLog, so I will import that. All right, so the logger variable is going to be a static instance of the NLog logger. All right, so the next thing I'm going to create then is a constructor. Now this is going to be the default constructor, and it has actually no properties or methods in it. So we're just going to create an empty constructor. So the next method we're going to create is called getInstance, and it will return the instance of variable that we have listed above. So let me put some notes here to see if we can clarify what this is supposed to do. So once again, this is the Singleton design pattern that we're showing. And so this function will create an instance of the class, a new one, if it has not been instantiated yet. However, if there is a value for the instance, then we're going to just tell the constructor, hey, we've already got one of these, so don't create a new one. All right, so let's go into the code to see if we can do something like what those comments are saying we should do. So we're going to check to see if the instance is null. That means it has never been instantiated. If it is null, then let's create a new one. So let's send them back a new value of instance. However, if it is not null, that means someone else already called this constructor, and we will return the instance to them. So this is the essence of what a singleton will do. Only one instance is allowed to exist. All right, so we have a method here that will get exactly one instance of our object here. I'm going to do the same thing for the other logger variable here called just the logger, which is part of the NLog system that we imported. So I'm going to do a similar kind of a class, or a method here, I should say, that's going to get exactly one instance of this logger. So I'm going to create a private method here. It's going to be used only internally in this class, and we'll call it getLogger. All right, so the rest of this code then is going to say, first of all, let's check to see if this variable is has a valid value or not. So we'll check to see if it's null. Then, if it is null, we will assign it a new instance of it, and we're going to use this parameter called the string, the logger. And then finally, we'll return this. So we're going to use this in just a second. So hang on, and you'll see where it fits in. So we're going to go down into these four classes, the debug, the error, the info, and warning. Did I say classes? I meant methods. These four methods. So the first thing I want to do is check to see if this argument value actually is null or not. Did someone pass me a value, or is it just by default null? It's probably null. So if it is null, then we're going to go and ask to get a logger. And we'll provide the XML defined property called myAppLoggerRules. When I say the XML, I mean the defined properties in nlog.config. And so we notice here that we have four different choices. So obviously we're going to choose debug to match the debug method. So let's choose debug here. So the opposite is the else statement. So if the argument is not null. So if it's not null, we're going to just pass that argument along with it. So this is handling two different instances of the constructor that we could use in a logger object. So we're handling no parameter for arg and one that might have a different one. Now this is going to be repeated all the way through the rest of these. So I'm going to copy and paste the code that I just typed and replace it in each of these sections. So instead of debug, we're going to put in error. And we'll do that twice. All right, so each of these gets their own different extension here. So error here matches the method name error, info matches info, and so on. All right, so this is a singleton pattern. We're accomplishing the exact same thing that we did before, but we're going to have exactly one instance of this logger throughout our program. So I'm going to save this changes, and now let's go and implement it here in the login controller. So switching over to login controller, this is kind of like changing paragraph numbers or turning a page here. So we're We're changing to a different goal. So what I want to do now is I'm going to just delete this line here because we no longer have to instantiate a new object every time that we use it. So that's the goal here of a singleton. So the singleton says we don't have to declare anything in a local context like this. However, how do I get to that logger? So I just changed this. I'm going to delete the part that says logger, and I'm going to put in my logger dot, and then I'm going to have to get instance. Now you notice it says I have no idea what you're talking about. What is my logger? So I'm going to go show potential fixes and say I want to use this directory called activity3 services utility. So let's just click that. And utility is the folder over here that contains my logger. So it seems to know that that's where it's located. So let's see if we can get anything from there now. So now I put in a period after my logger, and I choose get instance, and then a dot, and I can choose info. So there we go. It's the same goal, producing the same log messages, but we're using a singleton pattern. So I'm going to copy this section of this little bit of code here and replace it wherever I see the word logger period. So just paste over top and each of those. So this one down here is different. It has the error connection instead of the info, and they seem to work. I'm just going to test it out. Hopefully I didn't break anything. So let's log in with a new user. Okay, it looks like the application's up and running, so let's go to the login controller. I'm going to try the same guy I had earlier as Max, and his password is password1, and it is successful. Okay, so the time, I'm going to check down here, the time is 3:43 p.m. And let's go to the log folder and open this log and look at the time. So we have 3:25 it says. What is that? Oh, that's the date. Here is the time. 15:43, and it says there was a successful login. So it looks like logging still works. I didn't break anything at least. And so this is a demonstration of how logging is incorporated into your program. So we put it at key points, these logging messages, we put them at key points, such as a login success. Maybe we would put in a log message when we create a new order, or somebody checks out, or somebody finishes a game. You can think of pretty much every important milestone in the flowchart of your program. Depends on your program. Your design of where you put these statements about log messages is going to depend on what's important to your program. So you and your team will design log messages to be able to do a long-term analysis to figure out how busy your app is or how efficient it is. So there's logging and a little bit of a singleton design pattern to go along with it. So we're going to do the next video I believe we're going to do is REST services. So we're going to create a bunch of JSON data. So stick around for the next video if you like, and we'll see you soon.